You did a great thing. Congratulations. Now, pause, reset. You get to start over.
Let me take the time to get to know you. We can take our time, I'll wait as long as I have to. Let me take the time to get to know you. We can take our time, this love is still brand new.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Raj Nation Innovations Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. My name is Rajiv Nathan, aka The Raj Nation. I am your show's host, the founder of Raj Nation Innovation. I am also a hip-hop artist and a yoga instructor. Above all else, I am a storyteller. And I am joined by my co-host, Victoria Cohen. Victoria is the voice behind the blog almondsandasana.com. She's also a yoga instructor and community activist focused on helping you make lifestyle choices that positively impact you and the people you serve. This is Discover Your Inner Awesome, the only show where you get to eavesdrop on conversations with entrepreneurs, artists, and musicians about the stories, the journeys, the struggles, but most importantly, the questions. The questions that help creative thinkers like you and I better understand who we are, what we're doing, and how we can do it better. It's real talk with real people doing real big things to show you the real side of success. In this episode, we sit down with Justin Walker. Justin specializes in leadership development and team building. He is the executive director at Bunker Labs, as well as a former Navy SWCC operator, working within Special Forces Insertion and Extraction. Now, before we dive into this conversation, I want to extend an invitation, if you're not a member already. Join our tribe by going to discoveryourinnerawesome.com. Enter your email address there, and you will never miss another episode of the show. Getting an email in your inbox every single Monday when we release new episodes, as well as my stories and tips throughout the week on how to tell your startup story. All right, let's dive in now to our conversation with Justin Walker. How do you transfer leadership skills?
I have recently undergone a transition from the military back in 2015, and over the course of a couple of years, I've kind of recognized that a lot of my own skills that I learned in regards to leadership don't necessarily transfer as much as you would think they do. And you hear a lot of people that are currently either going through transition or people that are in the military, they'll talk about their ability to lead people, leading people into battle. They should be, offered really great jobs and doing really great things. And as far as like executives inside of companies, as soon as they transition, and it's just not really the case, as far as your leadership skills transferring. So there's a lot of things that need to happen, I believe, in regards to looking at your own leadership skills and how those directly translate, which ones translate, which ones don't translate, and how to actually pause, take a good solid look in the mirror, and build a real relationship with the people you're going to be working with in the near future in order to develop those relationships. Because a good leader in any specific situation requires a specific relationship between the followers and the leader themselves. So you've got to actually build that relationship, and it takes time. You can't just go from one place into the next and expect people to just jump right on board, especially the same way they did in the military. So as you're in the new world of corporate America, I'm putting air quotes around that, but as you're in this new world, you just can't do the same things. You can't lead the same way. You can't talk to people the same way. There's a lot of finesse involved in that, and it's on my mind a lot because I just see a lot of I don't want to call it like failed transitions, but transitions from the military that are much more difficult than they need to be, because people aren't pausing and they aren't taking a good solid look at themselves, and they aren't really looking to build those relationships, and oftentimes they don't know how, which is really upsetting.
So we have the right frame of reference. Can you talk through what the military leadership experience is like first? Because I think we have a good understanding of the working world leadership experience, but yeah, let's talk through the military experience first.
So I think the best example that I've seen from a corporate perspective is a woman named Kim Scott, who does this TED Talk or a similar type of talk on YouTube around radical candor and the importance of transparency and radical candor in the workplace, and how it's so unbelievably necessary in order to have productive conversations and make the organization move forward effectively. The military is very good at creating an environment that allows radical candor to take place. And basically what she means when she talks about radical candor, I don't know if any of you have ever taken a look at this talk, but basically, if you look at the X and Y axis on a graph, the Y axis is how much you care, like so caring deeply about the people you're with, and then the X axis is challenging people directly. Now, in the top right quadrant, which is where you want to be, so caring deeply and challenging people directly, you have what's called radical candor. And the next best thing you can do is, not care, but still challenge directly, which basically creates what she calls an a-hole. So, and nobody's shooting for second best here. So, but in the military, you have that. You have radical candor. Sometimes you have this, an a-hole that's talking to you and challenging you directly all the time, and they don't really know anything about you. Next thing you have in the bottom left quadrant is what she calls manipulative insincerity. So it's not caring and not challenging people directly. So essentially just sitting there quietly watching people drown. So in the top left quadrant, you have what she calls ruinous empathy. So it's like you care a lot, but you're not willing to actually step forward and challenge people. So now in the military, you have this environment that has been created that allows transparency. It allows candor to just run rampant. So, and there's a reason for that on so many different levels. It has to take place. So for example, if I'm about to jump out of a plane and I've got a guy in front of me who's also about to jump out of the plane, you know how you line up, you've all seen it in the movies, right? So you line up and your job for the person that's in front of you is to check over their parachute and make sure that it's safe. So now if I tap that person on the shoulder and I say, hey, your pack's messed up, guy. And he looks over his shoulder, he says, hey, F you, man. Like, I got this. I know what I'm doing. Like, that's just not the case. And you see that a lot in the workplace, that people are just willing to, not listen to the people that are behind them, tapping them on the shoulder, saying, hey, you messed up. You need to fix it. And in the military, that is just so prevalent. Like, it just runs all over the place.
Like you're allowed in the military.
You're allowed to tap
you tell someone they
messed up. It doesn't matter who
it
is. It could be the CEO. It could be anybody. You tap them on the shoulder and go, you're messed up. You need to fix it. And there's just so much of that goes back and forth, and it goes up and down the chain of command. So if my leadership is messing up, it's my responsibility as a follower to say, you're messing up. And an environment has been created that allows that to happen. Mostly in the special forces environments, but it's still prevalent in other areas as well. So as you transfer from the military, that's not necessarily the case. You don't have that transparency, and you don't have that candor. And it's not even wanted. They don't want it. People don't want to be told that they're messing up. They don't like it. They don't respond well to it either. So that's oftentimes like a big struggle for me, because when I transitioned from the military, I wanted to maintain that. So I would come to new organizations and new people, and I'm trying to create radical candor and transparency within the organization. And it's looked at as this terrifying thing to explore. And there's something that organizations do nowadays as well, and it's called 360 feedback. So it's getting that feedback from multiple perspectives. And it just, those multiple perspectives on everything that you're doing in the organization is, that transparency. And it can be absolutely terrifying to hear this stuff for the first time. And that's just something that blew me away. And for military people that are transitioning, especially enlisted people that have never been to college and I haven't really figured that piece out yet, and they're transitioning into the real world, they think it's directly transferable, and it's not. You've got to pause, and you've got to really take a good look at how you've been training in the military, and and what do people around you really want and need, and to do that is extremely difficult, and it's time consuming.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I worked for Pepsi for 5 years, and so I am familiar with like the 360 sort of review type thing. But what's really crazy is that even though that process was kind of in place, I never once in the almost 6 years I was there was asked to give any sort of review of any boss or manager I ever had. And that's
Do you think it was because you were a more junior position, or?
No, I don't. You know what?
It was of a manager. You're saying.
Of a manager,
okay.
Yeah, not of someone below me. I didn't have anyone below me. But no, I was never asked for feedback. And I mean, I had great managers. I had not great managers. I had good and critical things to say of each of them. But I was literally never solicited once. And I know a lot of other people that were in that boat.
So it was like 270 feedback, not
yeah,
360.
exactly. So it was kind of like selective. I don't know. Maybe there was like a rhyme or reason, and I just was not important enough to know what the rhyme or reason was. But surely as someone that was below a manager, I got feedback every year of like, this is what your peers, had to say, and yada yada. But I do think that's a really interesting point that you make, that in the military, it's so valued, it sounds like, and expected and encouraged to have that kind of radical candor where you care, but you're also giving critical feedback if you see the need for it. Whereas my experience in corporate America was, even though maybe on the outside they kind of act like, oh yeah, you should speak up or say things, it's really not anything that people above you want to hear. And it's not really encouraged, like actually encouraged to do that. You know what I mean? I think at a surface level, it's sort of, put out there, oh, sure, you should speak up, but don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's also this, it's almost taboo to build like a real genuine relationship in an organization now for the fear of like not crossing any specific boundaries that could be laid by other people.
Yeah.
And one of the things I do for organizations, because as soon as you start to care like deeply about other people, you will start to request that feedback. It just becomes an innate part of human nature, like where as you're going through life, you're just like, how am I doing? Mm-hmm. You'll start to ask those questions, and you'll feel like it's more okay to reach out to your leadership and say, hey, this is something that's been bothering me. But when that doesn't exist, when you don't care personally about people, you can't really give the opportunity for personal growth up and down that chain of command. So one of the things I do for companies, I help them figure that out through creating an environment that allows them to be very clear and transparent with each other and be vulnerable for probably the first time in their actual careers for some people. And there's in some organizations, there have been people that have sat next to each other for 15 years and don't learn as much as they had in the last 5 minutes through one of the programs. And by the questions that we ask, because we ask 4 specific questions. Who are you? Who do you want to be? How are you going to get there, and why? And those revolve around several different genres, like mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, familially, communally. And when you dive into those and answer those questions for the first time, for some people, it's probably the first time they've ever done any sort of self-analysis. And then it's also definitely the first time they've ever shared that information with somebody. So as you start to explore that and you share that for the first time, and you have this opportunity to actually like actively listen to what is being said to you, take notes on things that you find to be interesting, and then you build a real genuine dialogue around those important factors in another human being's life outside of water cooler conversations. How the kids, like how's the weekend, all that stuff. You get the basics out of
The worst.
Yeah, exactly. So it gives you an opportunity to be real for the first time in the workplace. And as you do that, a real genuine relationship starts to develop. And as you repeat the process over and over again, cross-silo the process as well, gives you an opportunity to know who you're sending that email to and actually care. Mm-hmm. So it creates that opportunity.
I think, Victoria, to your point earlier, I think in general, even like the concept of 360 feedback, in theory makes sense, and then most people implement it terribly. Most employees are afraid to give, even if it's anonymous, they're afraid to give actual feedback, or they just want to toe the line and play to egos. Most people, I don't know about most, but a lot of people don't implement feedback that they receive. Mm-hmm. And
oh yeah, seen that.
And then that's where you have I thought the point you made earlier, Justin, was interesting in that you said there has to be some level of like vulnerability, right? To share this about someone else. In the exercises you were talking about that you run organizations through, they have to be vulnerable themselves. And that's the first time I've actually thought about it in the sense of, I would imagine in the military, by nature, you have to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I have ever thought of vulnerable as a characteristic of being in the military.
Oh yeah, you bet. I mean, if you think about it, if you pause and think about it for a minute, you really, especially in the special forces groups, you've really got to know who you're working with. You've got to be able to pick them out in this as how they walk. Like, everything about these people, because if you move too fast, they die. If you move too slow, they die. If you don't pack your gear correctly, they die. If you don't plan the op correctly, every move you make has a ripple effect with other people. And now when you make decisions in life, you ask yourself typically 3 questions. Is it possible? Can I do it? And what's in it for me? Those are 3 questions you just ask yourself innately, whether you're buying a cup of coffee or whatever. So in the military, you get this concept beat into you from day one, which is this 4th question, which is what's in it for other people? So is it possible? Can I do it? What's in it for me? And now what's in it for other people? So when I go get a cup of coffee, you get another one for your friends. And it just becomes like second nature with everything it is that you do. And as you do that in the military, it just becomes, it becomes it's a lifestyle about caring about other people. And it gets ingrained so deeply. So when you transition out, you don't have that anymore. You don't really know how to manage it and how to grow with it. And people, again, it's really hard to create an environment that allows that to grow.
So do you think, I mean, it sounds like that would be a super advantageous skill or trait or, training that you would leave the military with, is that you have this extra fourth piece every time you encounter a question or a situation where you are thinking about everyone else. But it sounds like the tricky part is then when you have that and that's ingrained in you and that's how you make decisions and how you lead, but then you go to an organization that does not have that, and then you're kind of like, am I the only one who cares? Or is that sort of the one of the things?
Yeah, you feel like you're on an island in enemy-controlled territory, and the only way to get by is to blend into the environment and start being like everybody else. So you turn into the same type of person if you're not too careful and not aware of like what's going on. So, and we always encourage people, create this environment. You have to work to create the environment that allows this to foster and develop. And it takes time. Like, it's not something that just started as soon as week one, day one. It's something you experience week one, day one, whenever you don't shine your boots correctly and the whole team gets to pay for it. Like that's, and I have this story I tell in some of my programs where I was, I don't know if you've ever heard of mop and glow, but if you put it on your boots, it makes them really shiny. Yep. And once it dries, it cracks if you touch it at all. So, if you ran out of time and cleaning your room and getting things ready, and you're standing at attention outside your room for inspection, when the instructor comes by, they look down at your shoe and they step on it and it cracks, everyone gets to go hit the surf and go run out into the ocean, get cold, wet, and sandy. And then they get to deal with that for the rest of the day, and then they're pissed off at you for the entire day, and then eventually somebody else messes up and they get it worse, and then now they hate that other person. So you start to realize very quickly that every decision you make affects other people, and then that's just repeated over the course of 2 years in the training environment, and then it's repeated again as you continue on into a real world experiences. So. Yeah, and as you transition out, like you said, you just transition into the most selfish environment known to human beings, which is corporate America. Yeah. and now you've got to learn how to transition your leadership skills into that environment. It's extremely difficult, and you just come from a completely different world. And if you don't have an environment that's been created by the organization that allows that to happen and take place, then you feel alone. A lot of times you feel alone.
So how do you then, looking at it from the follower or following aspect of it, not like Twitter followers, but like, going to a company and being someone who has a boss, has a manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I come from Boston, et cetera. I would think it would probably be, I don't know about easy, but more natural because you're used to taking orders. Now you go to a corporate environment. It's not as strict, like you have to do this. There are deadlines and stuff, but is that something that you have to adapt to in a different way, or you have to become a different type of follower?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, especially when you transition from, again, like a special forces environment where objectives and missions and tasks are all co-created with your leadership. So when your boss comes in and they say, hey, I think we've got to do this mission, what do you think? And then you transition into an environment where you have somebody come in and lay a stack of papers on your desk and say, you need to get this done. And you're like, well, do I get a say in how this was ran? And the answer is no, you don't. So again, you have to, as an organization, you have to create that environment that allows you to co-create things, and it gets people more excited and they get more productive. And a person will break their back for you if you involve them in the process of making choices and giving them a little bit more control over their own life, even a perceived control over their own life by creating that environment. And now, does it take time? Sure. Is it efficient? Not necessarily at the beginning, but in time, it becomes second nature, and these decisions start to happen faster, and productivity will start to increase in the long run. And that's been proven time and time again.
One thing I think that I always noticed in like corporate America and in my life there, that always it was just a huge pet peeve of mine, and it was super rampant. And sometimes I think it was purposeful. Sometimes it was just people sort of picking up on verbal cues or whatever that maybe would be different in the military. Is A lot of things are teamwork, obviously. So again, I worked at Pepsi, and say there was like a launch of a new product. There's not one single person responsible for launching a new Gatorade flavor. There are hundreds and thousands of people along the line. But you'd often hear people on calls and on presentations saying, I launched this, I did this, yada yada. There was a lot of I, and not really a whole lot of we. And I was really conscious of that. I hated to ever just say I did something. I mean, if it was one task that I could very specifically, say that I did, but I understood that it was a team effort. I wasn't the only person who made coconut water. I didn't make it. I planned how much we needed.
I didn't grow the tree.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's partly because I specifically worked in supply chain, so I have a very clear understanding of how everything has to happen for something to get accomplished, and it's not just one person's step. But that was just something that I always really struggled with. But then sometimes it was also sort of explained to me that, well, you have to say I because you need to take credit for things, and that's how you're going to get ahead, and that's how you have to be competitive and have that edge. And surely the people that did say I launched this new flavor, well, whether or not they actually did that themselves or not, people sort of started to see that person as a leader who had accomplished all of these things. And so that was just an interesting thing that I kind of struggled with, not wanting to fall into that lingo, but at the same time knowing that that was kind of part of what you had to do. And I don't know, that's coming up for me right now, and I think that's probably an interesting thing. I don't know if you've run into that.
Yeah, I not me personally, since I've transitioned. I've stayed in a world. I mean, with the organizations I work with, yes, absolutely, but not me personally through any sort of corporate, because I don't work for a big
right. But you've
company,
seen it.
But I've seen it absolutely, and again, I think a lot of that goes back to having that trust, transparency, and a shared sense of purpose between everybody involved in a project. And when I help out with things at the Bunker Labs, I'm just one part of the team that has this national presence and makes a big impact in a very big way. But every single person has this wonderful, wonderful thing that they add to the mix that just keeps the organization alive and thriving and going in the right direction. And I'm just a very small piece of that. And the acknowledgement of that, again, it goes back to self-awareness and the leadership ability. And is it necessary to say I did this, I did that? Maybe it is. Maybe not. I don't have the answer for that. But I do. I can tell you right now that there's a lot more. There will be a lot more trust involved in establishing a relationship that acknowledges the we, for sure. And as time goes on, you'll see what's who's doing right and who's doing wrong, who'll come out on top eventually. But
Victoria, do you recall if it was more often men who use the I pronoun versus the we?
No, I can't say, because I can think of a lot of women who did it too.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are a lot of studies and research that has been done to show that men are more likely to take credit, whereas women are more likely to distribute credit.
Interesting.
Which also plays into then women being, perception being oh, they're not going to be as effective as a leader,
right? Because
they're not strong, that kind of crap. So,
yeah, I know.
But that's something that in a lecture I did earlier this year on diversity in the workplace and things like that. That was one of the things that we discussed, that women are more likely to deflect attention and want to distribute credit and create a more team environment. I don't know if that's more of a nurturing aspect because of that or what, but I do think, Justin, to your point, if you just think about it, it's way more fun to share in a win with other people than to just do it yourself. For as many championships as Michael Jordan led the Bulls to, I'm sure, he obviously couldn't have done it if he was a one-man team, but even though he was the leader, right, he had the supporting cast, and each of those he got to celebrate with an entire team, and the whole team got to celebrate with him. You also mentioned earlier if you bring someone into the decision-making process, or the creation rather, they'll break their back for you. And what comes to mind for me is the Simon Sinek TED Talk about golden circles start with why. And within that talk, his TED Talk, he mentions if people work for money, they will give you their time. if people work for your why, they will give you their blood, their sweat, and their tears. And that's so crucial because I think about the different work scenarios I've been in, and when you're bought into what the company is doing, or not even, because I know it can be hard if it's like a behemoth organization to feel like you have any, actual impact. If you're just bought into what your direct manager is trying to accomplish, if you can see that you think similar to them or that you have some set of shared values, you are so much more likely to go to bat for them and want to defend them and want to honor them in the sense of like do a good job and make them proud.
And I think it goes I think it goes beyond that in a lot of ways too. Because yes, like you have to really enjoy what you're doing if you want to end up breaking your back for somebody. But then if your leadership and the people on that team really and genuinely care about you as a human being and where you go in life, both personally and professionally, and that is acknowledged in the workplace and in life outside of the workplace, it can make one hell of a difference in somebody's desire to come into work every day on time. If they're personally invested in your personal growth as well outside of that, again, huge difference.
So I'm curious, it's kind of like, I don't know, at Pepsi there was like these like standard issue interview questions, it was like, tell us about a time when you were in a leadership position where you did X, Y, and Z. But so I'm curious to kind of get back to the idea of like leadership skills being transferable across different industries, different types of jobs. Obviously, specifically in your situation, what you've experienced is leadership in the military versus leadership in, sort of more civilian corporate life. And so what are some of the things that you think have been transferable leadership skills, and what are some of the things that are not transferable leadership skills? Because it sounds like you've got a list of those.
Well, I think the biggest ones are just the radical candor and the transparency that you're so used to. That has to almost just stop for a minute. It can start again in time, but you've really got to pause as you transition, and you've got to really. If anybody in the military is listening to this right now, you really need to pause and observe the environment. Just as you would on any other mission in the world, you've really got to pause. You've got to analyze the environment and make sure that it's a safe place before you start acting in any specific way. And a lot of times we'll come in, we'll be like, well, I did this in the military, so now it's, you should fall under me. I'm the leader, and what? Like, no, pause and observe the environment and make sure that what you're so good at in the military is cultivating like real, genuine relationships. You are good at that, and what you can do in the real world too is I don't want to say real world, when you transition, you can actually do that. You can cultivate that environment by developing trust and a shared sense of purpose within you, which you're very good at. Again, talk about the skills that you do have. Take that, pause, observe the environment, start developing real, genuine relationships with people in the organization, develop trust and a shared sense of purpose within your team, within the organization, and then take it from there. And you'll understand at that point which type of leadership style you're allowed to kind of start imparting on people, whether it's coercive leadership style, which is oftentimes what people see as the military, which isn't always true. But there's all was it 6 different types of leadership styles that are out there. But anyways, you'll understand kind of which leadership style fits the situation you're in a little bit more if you pause and understand the team that you're working with and the people you're working with. And we oftentimes forget to pause. And I think that's just people, not just people in the military. But that's just people. As you move from one organization to the next, you forget to pause and just observe the environment.
Let's pause 60 seconds for this public service announcement for you startup founders out there listening. The Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast is brought to you by Raj Nation Innovation. If you are not familiar yet with Raj Nation Innovation, let me tell you real quick. I talk to founders pretty much every day who flat out tell me, Raj, we suck at telling our story. Well, my job is to remove the suck. With Raj Nation Innovation, I blend a unique background in both branding and songwriting because, as I'm sure you know if you've been listening to this show, I am also a hip-hop artist. And so I look at business communication through the lens of entertainment and performance. And with that approach, I partner with growth-focused startups to help them develop their pitch, their story, and their message so they can go raise investor capital and acquire their early customers. Companies like FanFood, Keo, Jiffy Rides, Muses, and more have all gone through my signature brand communication playbook and come out on the other side winning pitch competitions, raising seed funding, and being masters of telling their story. holler at me at www.rajnationinnovation.com. That's rajnationinnovation.com. Back now to the show. Another area that I think is important to discuss is leadership is not just, do I have a team underneath me and do I have to lead them? It's also leadership within interactions that you have and just day-to-day things that you're doing. One specific area that, Justin, I know you have a really cool exercise I've observed and been a part of before, is basically around like leadership in a negotiation process and that whole idea of creating like the, it's like the dollar and then you have to get the dollar back, kind of not the sell the dollar, but the it's like teams A, B, and C,
right.
and you have to cut a deal in one way or another. Can you just kind of talk through, give the high level of that exercise, but then also talk through how we can apply leadership within just interactions like that?
Well, the point of that exercise is to help people understand how emotions affect decision making. And Jennifer S. Larner from Harvard University compiled about 35 years of evidence supporting the notion that emotions powerfully, pervasively, and predictably affect decision making. This was published in September of 2014. I'd encourage anybody listening to check that out. Pretty fascinating article. And so in that exercise, it's specifically designed to create an environment that creates emotional ups and downs and decision making based on what's going on, in that specific moment. And we told them this before we even start. Like, it's going to get heated, and you're going to start developing these weird conversations. But we give them 1 minute to negotiate. Each team gets 3 different rounds, and the goal is to just make a deal. The only instruction is to just make a deal with somebody. And what happens is there's money on the table. So if they end up making a deal, they get to split the money 50-50 or 20-30, 20-70 or 20-80 or whatever it is, whatever split they decide on. So,
but there's 3 teams, right? So one team's going to get left out.
One team always gets left out, and it's typically the team that turns into a bunch of jerks in the negotiation process. Like there's an opportunity to build a real emotional connection there, and it's not much time, but the idea is to just build a real relationship. And sometimes it's really difficult to do in just everyday conversations. So we just try to help them see that and approach those conversations through the eyes of the other person. So develop empathy, develop trust through building a relationship first, and then go from there.
And I think within that too, what's important is the notion that, so let's take negotiation, let's take it to a sense of selling to a customer. A lot of listeners of the show have their own companies, they've got to sell. They want to keep being a company. And that's an area where, even though it's essentially a one-on-one interaction, you can exhibit leadership in the sense of what's in it for me, what's in it for me, what's in it for other people. Understanding what am I going to get out of this, what can I give them, and what can they get out of this. The idea is, if I recall from the other exercise, you're not trying to necessarily like win a negotiation. Right. You're not trying to lose a negotiation. The idea is, I can't remember the word.
Just make a deal.
Yeah.
That's really what the negotiation's all for. It's to just make a deal with anybody. and how you get there is irrelevant.
Yeah.
That's the interesting part.
And it's like you can be in a situation where it's like you're either slave, servant, equal, or like authority and dictators. I'm getting the words wrong, but you want to be on that equal ground peer to peer, where you both feel like you walked away
getting something.
Yeah. Not like you feel someone was swindled. And even like, I remember in college, I took a class on, it was basically like a class on mediation, which is a really interesting profession because they're not lawyers. Their job is to mediate discussions. So like when the teachers go on strike and CPS administration is on the other side of the fence, they'll bring in a mediator to listen to both sides and to say, so this is what they are saying. And then, it starts with like, okay, so what are your needs? Could you do without any of those things? Right. Those kinds of things. What are your demands, et cetera? And one of the cool things I remember from that class was they always have it's called a BATNA, BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So you know what your ideal thing is, but then you know, what am I okay with
Your
leaving?
must-haves and what are your
What am I okay with leaving with? If I don't get it all, what am I okay with? And then you basically like, if I recall, you negotiate knowing you have that BATNA that like you'll fall back to, which makes you less of like a hard ass going in and more of someone who's willing to do a deal and wants to come to a healthy solution.
Right. Well, and I think the whole idea of, or not the whole idea, but partly what a mediator helps to do is act as that third party that removes the emotional aspect that undoubtedly you come to when you are in a disagreement or when you're, trying to get something and you're, versus someone else. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the sort of the perfect example of it sounds like exactly what your experiment, or I don't know what it was, lesson was.
Well, and too, it's like the idea is not that you're not trying to go in it. You don't want to leave feeling like you've won. You don't want to leave feeling like you've had to compromise. The idea is for both parties to leave feeling satisfied. That's the goal in like the mediation process. Do we both leave satisfied? And that, I think, to the entrepreneur's perspective, it plays so heavily into things like price negotiation. Because so often, if we're selling something and someone balks at price, we will like cower and back down. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. You want $2,000, $3,000? You want a $10,000 discount? Okay, yeah. We just want to do the deal with you.
It falls into leadership and following as well. So having that peer-to-peer relationship, even if you are senior to somebody in an organization, creating an environment that allows we were talking about co-creation earlier, because that creates a peer-to-peer environment. So you're not creating this dictatorship, and you're also not you're not just like you're tossing yourself under the bus every chance you get either. So it's creating that environment where you can really build things together. And as you do that, people are just so much more productive. And they come out of those conversations way happier, especially in the workplace.
We really need a few mediators in Congress. That would be super helpful, I think.
They should mediate filibusters. That's
Yeah,
what they should
right,
do.
there you go.
Make it 20 hours instead of 10 hours. So within this idea of transfer of military leadership, military way of life to working world way of life, specifically on the entrepreneur front, I recall, so we did an episode earlier in 2017 with Scott Hardesty of Ranger Nutrition, prior Army Ranger. And he had that one line where he's like, because the episode was really around winging it and avoiding winging it, because he had done a lot in his business that was like, well, fly by the seat of my pants, let's just see.
How did I get here?
And what he talked about was like being prior military, he kind of operates with like task, condition, standard, if I remember those three words correctly. And as an entrepreneur, he's not given that anymore, which led to winging it. So in that idea of military to entrepreneurship, how does one successfully go from being told what to do and having like a very rigid schedule to now having to create the schedule and create the responsibility?
A lot of that has to do with your ability to acknowledge that you don't know what you're doing. So again, it comes back down to self-awareness. You don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But go find help. So you have to know what you need and when you need it. For two major things that you have to figure out in developing any sort of business, especially as an early stage entrepreneur. And a lot of times that's a mentor in a lot of different fields, whether it's sales, finance, funding, marketing, strategy, legal, whatever area it is that you need help. Acknowledge that you need help is like step number one. Step number two, ask for help. Like don't sit on it and wait for something to happen. And you can end up winging it a lot of times, but you need a mentor. You need an advisor. You need a coach that will help you build that mindset and take ownership of the situation. Jocko Willink has a great podcast on that. Take ownership of your environment and your situation. Build the damn schedule. Like, get to work and build the thing, and stop sitting there wondering what you should do next. Like, own the situation. Move forward appropriately based on what information you're getting from the relationships you've developed, and then move forward on it. But you've got to acknowledge that you need help first. And Scott did that. It's one of the things he absolutely recognized. Like, I got this far on accident. Now I want to turn this into a thing. And so like let's actually move forward and get the help we need. And that's exactly what he did. And now his business has made major improvements, moving in the right direction now, because he's acknowledged that he needed help and he got the help he needed.
Do you think it is then an advantage or a disadvantage to be a military veteran entrepreneur, to be advantageous for your entrepreneurship pursuit?
No, I think I can be absolutely advantageous, but a lot of it, I think the one thing that oftentimes, and it held me back when I first started my business, is just fear. Right? It's not understanding that I mean, I was enlisted, so I wasn't an officer. I just transitioned from the military in 2015, and I had no clue what I was doing. I had no business plan. I had nothing put together, and I actually kind of stumbled upon it. We found a problem, found a solution, somebody paid us for it, and we were like, wow, like, this could be a thing. Like, let's maybe turn it into something. So then we just went forward on that. But the translatable skills were just the perseverance and discipline. Once it was a little bit more established, and once I had more confidence, because you have a lot of confidence in the things you do already in the military. When you transition out, you don't have that confidence anymore. Like Scott, when he's talking about winging it, you don't have that confidence anymore. It's kind of crushed. And then when you don't have confidence to act on things, you just don't act. And that's for everybody in the world, regardless of what profession you were in before. So, but military people, I think they have, a very special trait, but it's got to be kind of unlocked. It's like this secret skill that gets unlocked at like level 10. Mm-hmm. So, but you've got to get there first. And to get there requires, guidance, mentorship, coaching, somebody to help you build the confidence needed to get to that specific level. And a lot of that is an acknowledgement that you don't know what the hell you're doing. And once you've acknowledged that, you're going to be so much better off and more capable. And a lot of military people, one of the things they do very well on top of those things is they're willing to find people to coach them. And they find that in the military really easily. It's almost handed to you as soon as you find a new leader. In the Navy, we call them like a sea daddy. It's like somebody that comes in and is like your coach, your mentor. They've been in the Navy or the military for 10, 15, 20 years, and they just end up being your coach at the early stages. And they're placed in your lap to like give you direction. Now in the real world, you have to go find that person. As you transition out, you have to search. You have to you don't know who to trust. You don't know who to talk to. You don't even know where to start. But you have to start. So it's oftentimes one of the hardest things to do for transitioning service members is to say, I need help. I'm going to go find it. Like, do that, and you should be pretty well off in a very short period of time. But you got to put in the work.
How do non-military people be more empathic or empathetic? Empathic. Yeah. Towards military veterans? You said there's something that needs to be unlocked. So how do you be more empathic in order to help unlock that thing?
That's not something, I don't think that can be created. I think that's something that is either innate because somebody that has served, somebody very close to you that it's got to kind of be some sort of internal motivation or drive to go help a specific group of people. And a lot of that also has to do with the transitioning service member. If that transitioning service member, if that person's had a bad experience with somebody in the past who was prior service, who was a jerk, which is totally possible, then why would they have any sort of desire to reach out in the future? So a lot of it is reliant on transitioning service members to take their ego and the piece where they expect the world to just give them everything. And this entitlement perspective, like I served my country, so now you owe me, that has to go away. It has to be like, okay, I served my country, great, that was a piece of what I've done. Now it's time to move forward. I'm going to take that bar that I'm setting for civilians to treat me, anything beyond thank you for your service, like take the ego bar, lower it all the way to the ground, dig a hole, like bury it and run the opposite direction. and then go build genuine relationships starting from zero.
Yeah.
And I think people, especially transitioning service members, will be surprised at how well that's received. And then people that are, civilians and people that have not served will be so much more, excited to have a conversation when you're not sitting there jamming your military history down their throats, expecting to be, given something in return. Like once that goes away, you'll actually have a real possible genuine relationship being developed.
Do you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
No.
This keeps coming up.
I know.
But there was an episode on the newest season where Jeff's daughter is marrying a military veteran, and the whole episode is centered around how Larry refuses to say thank you for your service.
Typical.
Exactly. Yeah, get rid of that whole thing. Just bury your ego and move forward, and people will be so much more receptive.
Yeah.
And just don't even, it doesn't even have to be a main topic of conversation. You are a human being first, and then a service member's second. So like acknowledge the things you are as a human being in conversation and when you're building relationships. And if people are curious about your service, talk about it if they ask. Like, don't make that the center of why you should be given everything in the world. Like, it's not a realistic request.
So let's transition and talk about your business, your background. So you work with several high-profile organizations around the concept of leadership development, team building, executive coaching. Can you let our listeners know just a little bit more about your business, your background, and what you have going on?
Yeah, so I spent 12 years in the Navy as a SWIC operator, Maritime Special Forces Insertion Extractions, getting people in and out of really bad situations for the layman. And in that time, we recognized that students had a very difficult time overcoming the mental barriers in the training program. So creating an environment that developed trust and a shared sense of purpose at a very early stage in the boot camp stages of training. And in that, they were able to increase graduation rates by over 800% for the students that we were training. So we decided to take that out into the world and start helping organizations and people understand the value of the person standing next to you. And we do that through those 4 questions we talked about earlier, and creating an environment it's a very structured environment of dialogue between 2 different people. And again, trying to do that between silos as well. So in individuals on like one-on-one coaching, kind of the same concept. So we help get that perspective of people around you. I'm going to go to your family. I'm going to talk to your family. I'm going to talk to your kids. I'm going to talk to your wife. I'm going to talk to your dog. I'm going to get all these perspectives on who you are as a human being, and I'm going to feed that to you. And we're going to see how you react to it. And it's not always the nicest thing to hear for the first time, but I'm not here to be your friend. So I'm here to be a coach. So, it's an interesting environment that gets created to develop trust and a shared sense of purpose for the companies I work with.
What do you find is maybe like a consistent pattern or theme that comes up through the different executives you've worked with?
I think it's a desire to even talk to the people standing next to you is not there. Like when you show up to where people are they're just there to get the job done, and then it's not a fun environment for them to be in. It's not exciting, and I go through this exercise that talks about teams on a good day and teams on a bad day, and in our world they have to function the same. Like on the worst day when everything's going to crap, you still have to function as though your team is on a good day. So you got to communicate well, you got to trust each other, you got to collaborate, you got to move and get things done. You got to be productive. So. And in the corporate world, that's not necessarily the case. On a bad day, finger pointing, yelling, screaming, not communicating, not trusting, like all that goes away. So we try to develop that in organizations as well. So, but that's probably the common theme, is just a lack of desire to really reach out to the people standing next to you. And you talked about it earlier. As people, they have the I mentality. Everything's about me. So you don't even have a desire to get to know these people. You just don't even want to talk to them. You're like, are you really that type of person? and they're not. That's the thing. They're not that type of person. And then if we give them a chance, which is what I do for companies, I go in and I give them a chance to be a real human being for 3 hours, and then they can go back to being a jerk for a little bit. But I give them a real opportunity to be a human being, share a story, talk to each other, communicate as though you're 2 human beings first, and then your coworkers second. So once that's been created, it changes the entire environment. But yeah, once we get over that hump, things get much easier.
I think even too on the idea of coming in on a bad day and it not really being that big of a deal in the working world, I've even found when you work at a company, especially when you're younger in your first few years of your career, like the desire to like go out on a weeknight and like just be hungover at work on like a Wednesday and Thursday, like that is so prevalent. And then now running my own business for the last few years, it's like, man, that's so irresponsible if I decide I'm just going to be like super hungover on a Thursday or a Wednesday for this podcast, or, I'm going to basically half-ass all my responsibilities for a day because I'm just like, And what happens then? My business makes less money as a result. Yeah. Whereas, I was talking to a group of students once.
Jump in right there real quick, but like, if you take that concept into like big, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies where people still do this stuff, and they pause for a moment to think about how that's affecting the people on their team. If I show up hungover, I'm not able to perform well, which means my team doesn't perform well, which means guess what? Maybe we don't get the same funding for next year. Maybe we don't get to perform on the same tasks, or we don't get the good deals, the good opportunities, or whatever, or maybe you just get fired, one or the other. But it's just, people just don't understand the ripple effect. They don't understand. That's that fourth question you were talking about earlier. What's in it for other people? So if I go do this thing right now, even though it's just me and nobody's around me watching, if I go do this right now, what's the ripple effect? And when you start asking yourself that question, you'll start to make better choices.
Yeah. Now, one last thing before we wrap up. You're also executive director at Bunker Labs. We've had a few different Bunker Labs alumni, and as well as Todd Connor, the CEO of Bunker Labs, on the show in the past. Your role is specifically leading the programming, leading the curriculum and the courses. What has that opportunity done for you?
Oh, it's been an incredible opportunity for me to grow both personally and professionally. As I mentioned earlier, when I transitioned out, I didn't know what I was doing with my business, so I reached out as a student first and as part of the Bunker. And as I started understanding the importance and the value that what the Bunker Labs is doing in order to help military veterans transition into the world of entrepreneurship, I latched onto that wholeheartedly. And then there was an opportunity with my background in curriculum development, instruction, and coaching people to come in and do this for people that are starting their businesses. So in doing that, I've learned so much about myself. Again, like I say, it's a very wonderful opportunity to grow personally and professionally. And when I say personally, probably more personally than professionally in a lot of ways. I learned a lot of ways to run my business. I learned a lot of ways to not run businesses. And I've all my stories, failed partnerships, et cetera, in the past, and wasting tons of time, effort, and money all in the wrong directions, and then finally kind of figuring things out and becoming a little bit more stable. It took a few years to do that, but so personally though, it's helped me become a much better human being, I think, in a lot of ways, because you interact with so many different people. You've got to lead in so many different types of environments. It's not always rosy red, and it's not always terrible, but you have to find this interesting dyadic relationship between you and the students that are part of the program, as well as the subject matter experts that you recruit from larger companies and organizations, as well as the sponsors. So it's this environment between everything from Fortune 100 companies all the way down to idea phase entrepreneur, and all these different types of relationships that you've got to learn how to function well in between. So as you start to do that, you learn a lot about yourself in the process. And I actually learned that I wasn't I personally had a lot of issues that I had to overcome in order to become a better team player, even on the Bunker Labs team, because I was taking some of my leadership skills and some of the things I learned and bringing that radical candor and transparency into the Bunker Labs team. And that, again, that's not a healthy thing to do right away. It takes time to develop those relationships and the conversations that allow that trust and transparency to grow over time. And so that's one of the probably bigger things I've learned is to just pause and really reflect on how I'm impacting other people as well in a non-military environment. So great opportunities all the way around as a human being.
Yeah, awesome. I've enjoyed being a mentor advisor for the different cohorts at Bunker Labs for almost 2 years now.
Yeah. A little over, right?
No, it was August of last year.
Okay.
So
yeah.
About a year and a half now.
It's oftentimes the best, most ranted and raved on class that the students get to experience. So I appreciate your contribution.
Yeah, all good. So to wrap up, then we'll go one by one and give what we believe our answer is to today's question. We'll start with Victoria, and Justin will close with you. Victoria, our topic today was how do you transfer leadership skills?
I really liked the idea of sort of pausing as you transition from, whether it's military to corporate life, or from being a leader in a corporate job to being a leader in a startup, or to starting your own thing, or whatever it is, to sort of take a second to step back and reassess how the situation is different and how a different type of leadership might be necessary. Maybe it's a company that's already super developed and they kind of already have a way that they do things, and so maybe you kind of need to form a little bit more into that, or maybe it's that you're creating it from scratch. So I think that idea of pausing and sort of pivoting is really cool.
My answer, how do you transfer leadership skills? One of the things that I called out of this conversation was the notion or the idea that regardless of what the past experience was and what the current or the future experience is or is going to be, the methodology is probably going to have to change, as you alluded to, Justin, with the military to non-military experiences. But I think the idea is to look at in the past experience of leadership, specific like scenarios, what feeling was I trying to create? What emotion was I trying to create within the environment? And okay, functionally, I had to do it this way in the past to create that emotion. But now it's a new day, it's a new time, it's a new environment. Rather than saying I'm going to execute the same way because it worked, it's saying, okay, what's the emotion we're trying to create? And is it the same as before? Okay, it is. Now go from that point, using the knowledge I have in front of me with this group of people, with this environment, in this time place. What do I need to do functionally to create the emotion? Mm-hmm. Justin, how do you transfer leadership skills?
And it's actually kind of a mix. My answer to this is kind of a mix between the two things you guys mentioned. And I would say, in the pause, as you're observing the environment, make time to get to know people. Really get to know them beyond, what do you do here? What do you do for the company? Like, move beyond that. What do you do as a human being? Again, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially, familially, community. What do you do in all these areas? What type of person do you want to become? How are you going to get there? Get to know people on that level, and then co-create your leadership style based on the information you receive with these people. And again, when I say co-creation, like, that will allow you to just gather as much information as you need in order to deliver and receive feedback in whatever environment you find yourself in. But it all starts with getting to know people first, and then you can move from there.
Justin Walker, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Raj. Appreciate it.
That wrapped up our conversation with Justin Walker. Justin, thank you so much for sharing your journey, your experience, your story with our audience. Did you, the listener, enjoy this episode? If so, the best compliment you can give us is a rating and review on iTunes. Ratings and reviews help more people find the show, therefore more people get to discover their inner awesome. While you're leaving that review, go ahead and subscribe to the show on whatever platform it is you listen, whether that is iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, or the various other podcasting platforms in which you can find us. For full show notes, references, and resources, as well as Justin's contact information, grab it all at discoveryourinnerawesome.com. This was the penultimate episode of Season 8. That's right. Next week, we bring you our season finale featuring Lisa Sohan-Paul of Nom Nom's World Food. That'll tie a bow on this one. Thank you again to Justin Walker for joining us. For Victoria Cohen, I am Raj Nation. You have been listening to the Discover Your Inner Awesome podcast. We will see you next time. But in the meantime, take care and be awesome today.
My baby's sweet, she's sweeter than all. Outdoors, love course through my veins and I'm of my pores. I want you and I need you. Won't you come and see